Yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
Uh,
just show us. I'll try not to interrupt. Sorry, I'll be quiet and
yeah, so
I'll.
uh-huh.
Go on, sorry.
The recording is going. So I'm gonna go ahead and start and kind of build the level with you guys and show you kind of how it works. So,
Yeah, that's fine.
um,
I'll raise my hand if I want to say anything, and then you can just. I don't want to break your flow, so if we just do raise hands and whatever, then you can just do that if that's right.
uh, raise hands.
I think we can raise hands, can't we? Is there like an option to raise hand? If
Uh,
not, I'll just drop something in the channel. Just keep an eye on that, and then you can like answer questions at the end.
no, I
Does
mean
that
you
make
can
sense?
like if you have a question, just interrupt me. It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. Yeah.
but
Fire away though.
so the like I was trying to say earlier, the old one was with scenes, so like it was annoying to modify it because multiple people shouldn't be working on the same scene, otherwise we get conflicts. But here I made them into prefab, so each room, as you can see, is its own prefab. So these are the two rooms that I showcased uh, in that showcase there. So basically, what we're gonna do to make a new room, right? Well, actually, here so we're gonna go inside one of these prefabs and see what's going on here. Um, so there's the room, which is the parent object, and there's two child objects, the past variant and the present variant, right? So if you are disable the past or enable the past variant and disable the present variant, you'll get the other version of this level, right? Um, so what does each of these have, right? So each of these are kind of like have somewhat of the same things, right? As you can see, the past variant has a camera confiner, player spawn points, room triggers, grid, and the present variant has the same thing, right? So they're basically this very similar levels, right? You can literally, if you were to enable both of them, right, you could literally take one level, you can move it and put them side to side and see, what that they're like just a slight variation of that same level. They're like copies, right? So I'll move that back. So if we kind of look deeper into what each of these have, right? So the present room has the camera confiner, and what this is it shows it's a collider, it's a trigger collider, as you can see, it's a polygon collider 2D. It's set to a trigger, which means it won't collide for the player, but it tells the camera where its bounds are, right? And the way it's very easy to modify it, there's a little add collider here. You click that, and then if you move your mouse around the corners, you'll see these the little blocks up here. You have to be careful though, since it's a polygon collider, it means you can make multiple edges on it. So if you were to click here, you see it's gonna like make a triangle. We don't want that, right? The camera can't go sideways like that. So you want to make sure you don't click anywhere like on the line. You just click on the corners, right? You see it'll snap to a corner and then you can take a corner and you can drag it. So if you want this level to be slightly taller, you just have to make sure you change the confiner. It doesn't have to be perfect or anything. The camera will figure that part out, but you have to make sure that you resize the confiner. So that's that. And then the next thing is the player spawn points. This is just a container for the spawn points. As you can see, these little blue dots here, I made a little gizmo so you can tell where the player spawn points are. The spawn point here is the starting spawn point, right? And this one here is the one if somebody's coming from the room number two. If they're coming back to this room, this is where they'll spawn coming back to this room. Um, so and I'll show you guys how to link those together. But each spawn point has a spawn point component on it, and it has an ID. So these IDs are important. It's good to just keep them like 1, 2, 3, 4. But you can technically just make this whatever number you want. So spawn point 1 ID has 1, spawn point 2 has ID of 2, right? And you'll guys see here in a second why that's important. And so that's going to be in room triggers. So room triggers, again, this game object here is a container for the room triggers. So trigger 1 is going to be the one and only current trigger inside this room. And it is a collider, or I'm sorry, a trigger this time around, a box collider 2D. Also marked as a trigger, it can be, the size on it can be changed. It can be bigger, it can be smaller, as needed. Whenever the player, like in this case, jumps up and touches that trigger, it's going to do something. And what is it going to do is inside the room switch trigger, right? So it's very simple again, and this is where the IDs come into play. One thing I forgot to mention on the parent room game object, it has a room ID, right? So this current room is room 1, If we were to open up room 2 prefab, it will say room ID 2, right? And if you make another room, it could be 3, it could be whatever number you want it to be, but it's probably good to go in order. So again, going back here, the room trigger, it has the target room ID. So this trigger is currently targeting room number 2, which is the other room. And then inside that room, it's going to target a spawn point, right? And in this case, it's targeting spawn point 1, right? So if we were to go to room 2, right, pretty self-explanatory in this case, right? Here's room number 2, room ID 2. And then the spawn points, right? There's only one spawn point here, and it's spawn point number 1, so it's targeting this one here. So you come in here, and you'll spawn right there. So that's that. All right. So basically, how do we build a room, right? Because I guess here let's look at this. So there's the grid here, right? And the grid is what makes up each of these little boxes here. So there's the background, right, which has nothing right now. And you can tell like what each grid contains by you can enable and disable it at the top. And background currently has nothing. That's going to be for later. Ground, as you can see, it highlights all the gray boxes. That's just regular ground that you can walk on. You can't wall jump off of the ground. So if you were to disable this, you can be like, okay, good, that's on the ground layer, right? You can tell that everything else is not on the ground layer, and that'll be more relevant later. I'll show you guys why that's important.
I just had a quick question.
Yeah,
Are we using prefabs or not yet? I'm just thinking
for
of like bringing in artwork from the artists. Would it be easier if we started using prefabs, and then we can just update the prefab with the art? That'd save a lot of work later on.
well, what do you mean by that? Because prefab right now the rooms are prefabs. So
Okay. I was thinking
uh,
the individual assets of like the walls and stuff. Would that be possible, or is that
no, it's
not
so
really a
the
good
walls
idea?
are tiles. They're from a tile map.
Oh,
So
okay.
that can
Fine.
still be that can be replaced. Some stuff
Okay.
might have to be moved around a little bit, but for the most part, you can drag in their assets and you can replace the tiles with their tile assets, right? So
Yeah,
it's
makes sense.
just a one-to-one swap. Um, so yeah, so ground, right? Enable, disable. You can see which one it is. Same thing with the walls, right? You should be able to enable and disable them, and they'll be separate. Hazards, same thing. And then foreground, that's for later as well. So there's nothing there right now. And then props, that's where we put in things that are not part of the tile map. So like other game object. In this case, I just have this little door thing um, there for now, but that's not important at the moment. So let's go ahead and build a third level here together so we can kind of see how this works. So the way I'll do it, right, it's the same thing you guys, because right now I'm building these levels in Ninja Prototype, but like I can go like if you're working in your own scene, you can build these levels in your own scene. They don't have to be built in any specific scene. That's the beauty of this. So everybody can contribute to making some levels and stuff like that. Um, so what I'm gonna do, right, is I'm just gonna go to any one of these prefab levels and I'm gonna hit Control D. So I'll go to like um, I'll just copy the first one for now. So hit Control D, right? It'll make a copy of the same exact room, and then you can just rename it. Right now it's just room 1, room 2, room 3, but you can name it like um, Crow's Nest and whatever. And you could prefix it with like a number so that it stays in order because this is like numeric and alphabetic order. So if like I want room 3 to be at the top because that just makes sense. Normally I would just prefix it like with a 1 underscore, right? And that's because that's the ID maybe I gave it is 1, right? So that might help kind of organize things a little bit better, but that's up to the level designers how you guys want to organize that. So now I made a copy of room number 3, right? So if I go into it, um, we come up to this again. So what I'm gonna do right here, like you don't have to start from scratch, but I'm gonna start kind of from scratch making this so that you guys can kind of see how it works when you do start from scratch. So to clear it out, right? What is happening on the grid here is it's part of a tile palette asset, right? So if you don't have this little tile palette thing, um, on your thing, you can go to Windows, 2D, and then tile palette, right? And it'll bring this little tab up. So what this is, and again, once the artist will get their assets in, we'll replace these. But right now, these are just the three tiles that are existing within these levels here for now. So this part right here is very important. You have to make sure whenever you're drawing tiles on the map, you're in the correct layer, right? And the layers are in this grid are background, ground, wall, hazard, and foreground, right? So if you open up this little drop down, you'll have these layers to select from, right? You can use this drop down. As you can see, currently we're on ground. So you can select like background, foreground, whatever you want. Or you can also click over here, right? So like if you want to be on the wall, if you click on wall, notice it'll change to wall on here as well. But this part is very important because, so for example, right, here's the wall. I actually don't like using these right here because it highlights things and it's kind of hard to see. So normally I just have it like on the grid, and then I just use these to select stuff. Um, but anyway, but here's why this is important to know what layer you're on, right? Because if I go to the ground, right, and I select the little ground thing, right, I can modify this level. I can add things by drawing the ground like this, right? So I'm literally drawing the level. Um, but if I'm like, okay, well, I want to do the wall now, right? And you switch to the little blues, right? Because that's the wall. And then you start drawing the wall, but you don't realize that you didn't switch to wall. This is still going to be ground, but it's going to look like a wall, right? Same thing with the hazards right now. If I'm on the ground and I start drawing hazards, these aren't going to do anything. They're not going to be hazards. They're going to be wall or ground because that's the layer you're on. So we'll draw that. Um, to delete, by the way, you can hold shift and then draw and it'll delete, right? So you can like draw like this. You can also like if you want to, and I'll show you in a second how to do the mass deletes, like mass deletes, but you can select like just a random like section of this, right? You'll see it'll bring this up and you can hold shift and it'll delete like the entire box of stuff. Um, so with the so what you do, right, is the way you see that you messed up is when you go to the ground on here, right, you'll notice that it highlights everything that's ground and it'll highlight this as well. But you can like disable it right here and you'll notice that like, oh wait, oh whoops, the wall keeps disappearing because I accidentally put it on the ground layer. Um, so what you do, obviously, is just go back into ground. Because if you go into wall and try to remove the ground while you're into wall, see, nothing's going to happen. I'm holding shift and I'm not removing anything. So you have to be on the correct layer to also remove stuff. So since I accidentally drew this on the ground, I can go on ground and I can remove it. Um, and then I would just go to wall and then I would draw that wall. And now this is going to be able to, player will be able to jump off of this because it's now under the wall layer correctly as it needs to be. Again, same thing with hazards, right? If you want to draw hazards, you've got to be on the hazard layer, and then the player will die when they touch that. Um, okay, so let's go ahead and remove this real quick. So what I'm going to do here is, so I'm going to go to wall, and then kind of how I showed, I'll do this. And I'll remove the walls. I'll go to the hazard, same thing. Hold shift, remove the hazards. Ground. All right. Now I removed the present variant, right? But I have to go to the past variant to remove the past variant stuff. So I created these buttons through a script here to make it a lot easier to, because normally you'd have to, if you want to switch this, you'd have to go to past variant, enable it, then go to present variant, disable it. Oh, this is another key point here. So you don't want both of these to be enabled, right? The grayed out means it's disabled. So if you have both of them enabled, what's going to happen is each of these have a grid. And if you go to the drop down, you'll notice it's going to show a selection for each of these grids, right? So there's two foregrounds, two grounds, two, like, you're not going to know which one's which, right? So just don't have both of these enabled. And the easiest way to do this is if you go to the main parent game object so room 3. Made these buttons right here where you can switch between the two, right? So show present, it'll swap it to present. Show past, it'll swap it to past, right? So you can swap back and forth like this. Um, so we're gonna go ahead and remove the ground here as well. Let's remove the hazards, the walls. All right, and then is that the ground? That's probably the ground. It's not. Let's see what that is.
Are we confident that the recording is working, by the way?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah, it's working. Okay, so now I have the past cleared, right? So I'm gonna go back to the room 3. So present, past, everything's cleared, right? So the way I kind of like to start is I like to start with the general bounds, right? And I can just keep the one from the previous one just to give myself a reference. Keeping in mind that a player is about 2 cubes tall, but we're probably not going to make it more than that. We might make it smaller. Right now, I think he's like a little like 90% small or 10% smaller than 2 cubes, right? But these cubes can also be used as reference to see how high the player is. Something that the level designers can do is you can go into play mode with this grid on and you can jump up and see how high the player will jump, how many squares, and you can kind of use that to judge it when you're making the levels. So what I'm going to do first here, so this is the past variant. I like to start with the present variant and kind of adapt the past one to it. So I'm going to go to present. And again, if I see I don't see that confiner, if I want to see that level confiner, I have to go under camera confiner and it'll show up. And I can start like drawing while this is up as long as I have it selected in here in the scene. And then if I want to go back to the buttons, I just have to go back up to the room 3 parent object. So I'm going to kind of start with this level confiner here. We're going to go to ground. We'll start with the ground. We just want to make sure the ground tile is selected, right? And then I'm just going to draw my ground here. Um, and then just to kind of show you guys, I'm going to build a slightly bigger level here. And it's just going to be more linear. Um, and then if you're like not straight like me, you go hold shift to delete. But there you go, I'll build like the bounds for this level. And then after I kind of make the bounds for the level so I know what I have to work with, I'll go in and I'll adjust the camera confiner. So again, we just go to the corners, put it on the corners here. All right, so now we got our levels here, so the camera will function as needed. And then you just unclick Edit Collider when you're done editing it. And then so first thing we want to kind of do is let's see, where do we want to spawn the player, right? So, and we can, we probably don't need this spawn point, so I'm gonna delete it for now. But if you hit W on your keyboard or you hit the this key right here, it'll bring up the little arrows to move this around. So we'll kind of, let's say we'll want to spawn the player maybe. Actually, you know what? Let's do this because the player spawns on the right side. We're gonna bring him in from the right side since he spawns on the left side in the first level there. So so we'll bring him in over here. And I'll make it. Let's go back to. So we're gonna go back to my room, and then as soon as you click inside the tile palette, like you click on one of these tiles, it'll bring up the grid again if you don't have it. And since the player kind of comes in from the left side on the other level, which I'll actually go back real quick. So like room 1, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to ground and I'm going to remove this right here. So the player will basically be able to transition back to the other level that we're just making. So let me throw in a room trigger. So to do that, I'm going to just copy the one that we have going for the other level. So Control D. Just name it room trigger 2. And then we can move this trigger back down to this side. Going to resize the trigger. Okay. And then I have to give it a target room ID, which we'll make the room 3 ID 3, so I'll name that properly, and then it's just going to be the first available spawn point there. So we'll go ahead and save that. Now, you have to keep in mind the past variant, right? So if the player switches to the other grainy variant of the level, it's not going to have that trigger, right? It's only going to have the other one. So all you have to do is trigger 2, just control D, right? So it makes another copy of that trigger, and then you just drag it over here, and then just rename it. And so now the other room will have the trigger in the same exact spot as this room. Yeah, okay, so so this should be set up. So there's nothing else you should need to do in here. I guess the only thing is to remove the wall in this other variant here. So ground here, remove the wall, and then yeah, now we should be good to go. So we're gonna go back to room 3 and start working here again. So remove this portion here, so the player will be as if he's walking in from the other side. And then we'll add some ground here. Okay, so and then what we want to do here is provide a room trigger to go back to the other side. I think I made it 3x3, so I'll put that back in. But I have the trigger still from the other level that I copied over, so I'm gonna move this trigger back here so the player can go back and forth between the two levels. Resize that. And now the target room is going to be room 1 because that's the room we're going back to, and the spawn ID is going to be 1 as well. So actually, so in that room we have 2 spawn IDs already. So we're going to make a third spawn ID for this transition to go back. So I'm actually going to make that a 3. And I'll go back to room 1, right? Because this is spawn point 1 here. This is spawn point 2. And then we'll make spawn point 3 over here. So I'm going to go into my spawn points. So I can just control D this one. I'll call it spawn point 3. Just gonna order it so it's in order. Spawn point 3, and I have to give it the spawn ID of 3 so that the room trigger can know which spawn point to target. And then I'll move my spawn point like somewhere over here. Um, and then if I want to see all my spawn points, because right now it's showing this one, it's because I only have that one selected. But if I want to see all of them, I just have to make sure I select the parent game object of the spawn points. So if I select it now, it'll show all 3 of my spawn points in this room. And I might do a thing where I'll dynamically draw like a number on them, so that could be more easily seen for you guys, which spawn point represents which ID. But anyway, so and then the other thing again, whatever you do in the past room or the present room, and you want it to persist in both rooms, you gotta copy it over. So this present is not gonna have the spawn point, so you gotta make sure you Control D that over there. And this is also important because that could give you some errors if you don't have this copied, because if the player's in the past, right, or the present, in this case, the present timeline, and he switches and there's no spawn point 3 with 3 ID, it's just not going to work. It's going to give like an error and nothing's going to happen. So if that's happening, it's probably because it's not copied over to one of the variants. So let's go back to room 3 here real quick. So everything now should be set up, right? And we can actually already test this. So let's just make sure that everything's working as far as transition goes. So the way you do this, right, inside of environment, and I actually have this prefabbed, I believe, do I not? Oh yeah, I do have it prefabbed. Under managers, right? So prefabs, managers, there's a level manager, okay? This is needed for these levels to work. So in my scene, and you guys can obviously like inspect my scene to see how it's set up, but currently the level manager works like this, right? So there's a few little areas you gotta set up. So player setup, right? If you manually drag the player into your scene, which you shouldn't be doing, but if you did, you just have to make sure you select players in scene. I made it so that the other box goes away if you still like that. But normally you should take the player prefab and drag him inside this player prefab box here, and it'll spawn him in on game load. Camera setup, just have it set to auto find camera. What it will do, it will look for a camera with a tag of main camera like this. If it finds it, it will assign it on its own. If for some reason it's not finding it or you're having issues with that, you can uncheck this and you can manually drag in your camera from the scene like so, right? And then you'll manually set it. But for the most part, just leave it auto find. This is the room setup. This is the important part. When you're creating new rooms, right, you have to add them to this basically tracker for the rooms, right? So I created room 3, so I'm going to drag it in here, right? And I'm going to add it. So now I have all 3 rooms in here. The starting room ID, starting spawn point. So what this is, if you want to test a room individually, right, like you as a level designer, you don't want to have to start from level 1 and just work your way to whatever room you're trying to test, right? You can select the exact room you want to start in and then the exact spawn point in that room, right? So if I want to start in this room that I just created just to test it, I can do 3 here, spawn point ID, whatever I want, and then I'll start there. So post-processing, just for the most part, have it set up like this. Don't worry about this for now. But basically, if you do want to mess with some post-processing stuff and see what cool things you can make, if you left-clicked on the past or the present, it'll take you to the actual post-processing file, right? And here you can mess with the color adjustments, grains, over like all these different overrides. You can mess with them live. So while you're playing, right? So there's nothing else at this level matter. This is just some debugging stuff. Don't worry about that. So I'm gonna hit play here, and so we spawned. Oh, okay. It didn't load. Okay, so what happened is it loaded it in the present or the past, and we were working in the other. So let's go to room 3, and if we look at our past variant, it's currently empty. And let's see. Oh, duh. All right. So player spawn points. So we have spawn point there. Let's go look at our present, or past, I mean. And then, so past currently is empty. So if we disable this and we spawn here, it's going to be empty. So we're going to do real quick, just for the testing purposes, I'm going to copy this over, right? So everything right now is the same from present and past. So what I'm going to do is, I'm sorry, I'm getting a phone call real quick. Give me a second.
Is this all making sense to you, Thomas?
Yeah, for the most part.
Sweet.
I've written down a few things that I wanted to ask, but pretty much, yeah.
That's right. Yeah, we can have like a Q&A at the end, I think. That makes sense. I just don't want to break his flow, so I'm like, kind of like sitting on stuff.
Yeah, I'm just absorbing all
Yeah.
of this. So
For me, actually, now he's going through it, it looks very familiar to 3D. It doesn't look that bad, and the way he set it up as well is quite similar to Get the Hell Out of the Office. So yeah, I remember how we did that. So yeah, hopefully, yes, this gives us some more confidence in what's being built in the game and everything, and then hopefully we can allow some scope creep now. But yeah, let's see where we get to. I'd like to do another build where we build like a small version of your map with like minimal viable product stuff, and then we can start thinking about like fancy stuff like the final boss fight and things like that, cutscenes, that sort of thing. It would be good to have at least, well, it would be good to have like a opening cutscene if we can, because I imagine there's quite a bit of narrative that you'd like to convey at the beginning of the game, just to like give players context for what they're seeing in the gameplay. So I'm open to that, especially if we've got an artist who's kind of like dedicated to the slides for that. Did you see the video we had for Get the Hell Out of the Office? Get the Hell Out of My Office, sorry.
yeah,
Yeah. Is that looking like something that you think would work with this with your narrative? Or
Yeah, I think so.
okay, sweet. Yeah, we'll talk about that more after the call because we've got that in 40 minutes if we can. But I'm conscious that the art call I think is at 6 p.m. and I'm happy to like cancel that 5 p.m. if Deadshot wants to overrun. And I'll just let everyone know that that's what's going on, and then we'll just push it to later. I think I'm probably the one who's in like the earliest time slot right now because I don't think there's anyone who lives east of me other than I think Lyset lives in Norway, but I don't think she wants to join the narrative call. Deadshot, are you back?
Yes, I have
Okay,
returned.
sweet. Yeah, take over.
Yeah. Okay. So we're just gonna go back to room 3 real quick and make sure everything's set up correctly. So right now we have nothing in the past variant. It's all blank. So what I'm gonna do currently, normally I wait till I kind of finish the present level before doing this because then you just have to do it again. But since I'm just trying to show some stuff, I'm gonna do it now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy. So I'm gonna control D present, right? So everything in present and past should technically be the same. So I'm gonna copy present, like control D, and then I'm just gonna rename it to past variant, right? Um, whoops, no, two variants. There you go. I'm just gonna delete the original one there, right? And I'm gonna rearrange these, right? And then if I enable it, it's gonna have the same exact level. So if I just switch back and forth, there should be no difference. And so if you like try to go switch in, it's like, oh, okay, it's not working. You just have to make sure that the setup rooms here don't have anything missing. So past time, present time room, right? So currently the present time is dragged in properly, but the past one is missing. All you do is just past, bam, now you're good. And then now you can switch back and forth, right? And they're exactly the same because I copied them. So the other thing too, I forgot to do. So in room 3, room ID is still set to 1. We just have to change that to 3. That way, and that's why there was an issue with the spawning because we were trying to spawn to room 3 ID 3, but there is no room ID 3 since I didn't have it marked at the time, and it was just spawning us in space. So now it should be working in theory. I clear out the log here. I hit play. Make sure we're not getting any errors. And we should spawn at that spawn point that we set here and the level that we want to start spawning at, right? So now I just made this level. I want to test it out, and yeah, my spawn there. So all we're gonna test here, right? And you can go back and forth if we click between the different time zones. So all we want to test is just going back and forth and make sure we're just going into our proper levels here. Right now, there's this little issue where it maintains the velocity of the player. So if I'm like moving, it it spawns me there, but I keep that velocity, so I keep moving instead of dropping straight down. So that's gonna get fixed, so I don't have to worry about that. But that is happening right now for the awareness. But yeah, I can go back and forth, no issues, right? So everything's good there. Let's go back to our room. I'm gonna continue working in the present time frame here. We're gonna go back to the tile palette. Make this bigger here. All right, so let's kind of work here. So this is again, you have to be very careful with the layers. Let's just kind of pro tap a little level here. Let's do some random stuff here. All right, so uh, right. Again, you can make this as big or as small as you want. Obviously, we can just change things as we go to as far as level wise as for height and stuff like that. But um, make sure you adjust the camera confiners whenever you guys are kind of settle in on the size of the level. So yeah, so the player will spawn here. So we'll kind of just look at this. Let's see. Let's make some. Again, see now. I got too excited there and I was like, oh shit, let me just do some hazards here, and I forgot to switch to the level. It's very easy to do that. That's why I keep saying make sure you watch your layers, right? I do this all the time. I go here and I'm like, oh shit. I usually realize right away and it's great, but if I don't and I just keep doing stuff and then I screw up, it kind of sucks because you have to redo it. That's why you have to just watch it. So I'm gonna delete that. I'm gonna make sure to go back here and go to hazard, and then I'll draw my hazards. Maybe we'll get some hazards here. right? You can do whatever you want with the hazard. There could be a long hazard spike there, whatever you want, right? So we'll work on that. And then let's go to wall, make some jumpy walls we can jump off of. Maybe a player falls down here. Still a jumping puzzle here. I don't know, something like that. Okay, so do some of that, right? We're in the right layer. Now, let's, I'm gonna go ahead and delete the past variant so I can kind of update it basically. So again, go back to my present variant that I just made, Control D, move it kind of in the upper slot so that it's in order. So past variant, present variant. All right, I'm gonna go at room 3. It's gonna be missing again, so we're gonna drag it in, and now we should be good. And then if I go in here, both of them are selected, so I can just click on any one of these, right? So if I go, I can go back and forth, right? So the way I kind of do these variants is I start with, it's gonna clear out the log, okay. I start with the present one, and I'm like, okay, so let's say the player walks over here. If he like jumps up, maybe we want to allow him to maybe swap in or actually, like, let's go over here. Like, right, let's say, so the player can double jump here, he can jump here, and then here might be a little difficult to get over here. So maybe we swap this in with like a wall or something. So I would switch to the pass variant, right? And then again, I have to make sure I'm on the right layer. And this is also important, right? So if you're on the pass variant, right, and you go to ground and you're like, okay, well, cool, I'm gonna draw a ground here, just kind of like block them in. And I go back to the present variant, right? Notice it's gonna just change to something else. So you can't just be like, okay, now I'm gonna draw a ground on the present variant somewhere else, right? You have to make sure you go back in here and select that ground if you want to keep drawing ground. So you just got to watch for that. But yeah, so basically now I can kind of see, so I can switch between past and present. Like, okay, so in the past there's a wall there, in the present there's no wall. And you can just kind of keep swapping back and forth to give yourself an idea of what it will look like for the player to keep swapping back and forth like that. So in the present here, maybe, so there's a wall here, right? And then present, there's no wall here, but they drop down here. So maybe they have to swap like real quick as they're dropping after the wall. And then this will be like, instead of it being a hazard, maybe it'll be ground. So if I want to modify that, right, so I have to go to hazard, delete it. Again, I don't need to have hazard selected. I could have wall selected as long as I hold shift. I'll just delete it instead of drawing it. And then I'll go to ground, right, and I'll draw ground here. So now, right, if we're in the present, there's a hazard there, no wall, right? So player could die there if he just jumps, but in the past there's a wall here, so maybe the player will have to come over here and then switch to present and realize there's thing here. So if as soon as he jumps down, he has to quickly swap back so that it turns into a ground and then he can safely go on, right? So that's kind of how I look at it. I'm not gonna bore you guys with, actually making a full level or anything, but I just want to show you kind of how the levels are made. So now again, as soon as I make my changes, whatever I need, I shouldn't need to change anything anywhere else, right? Like the level manager, I can just leave it alone as long as I have my rooms added, and then whatever room I want to start with, right? So I can still technically have this up. As soon as I hit play, it'll automatically swap over to the game scene. And then I can just immediately start testing my level, right? So, right, I'm over here, and if I swap back and forth, just like we made it, so, right, the player will die here, and you can test that out, right? The player will always go back to their previous spawn, like whatever, it's kind of like the checkpoint. Um, and then, right, and then, so the other thing too is, right, so since there's a wall here in the other dimension or time frame, right? If the player is standing there and he tries to switch, it won't do anything, right? If you can keep clicking, it's not going to work. There's a check that's been done in the background to make sure there's nothing there because you shouldn't go inside a wall, right? So he'll have to move back over, then he can switch, right? I can't move through. And then I just have to kind of swap in time here, for this like little mechanic that I just made there, so that I don't die, right? And then the walls, right? So for the ground, right? Like I can't jump off of the wall, right? But since this is marked as a wall, I can. So I can, do my little jumping puzzle. And then get over and then do my level, right? Thus far, what are you guys' questions?
One thing I was wondering is, whenever you are starting, does it like automatically start in the present?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And then also with room 3, it looks like the camera isn't like staying or like sticking to kind of like a corner, um, versus like in the other rooms where it was kind of doing that, if you know what I mean. And I was just wondering like what was causing that.
So I'll hit play and then you can maybe kind of show me what you mean.
When you go to room 1, the camera is
Oh,
like sort of sticking in the corner, but here it's just like free floating kind of.
yes. So what is happening here, most likely is the camera is bigger than the confiner. So we're gonna double check that real quick. Um, so if the camera can't fit in the confiner, it's gonna be wonky. So one thing to make sure is that the confiner is bigger than the camera. So we'll kind of make it bigger for now. And again, like you could, if you're trying to make a level this small, what you can do is you can still do this, but then like inside the inside the actual like grids, what you would do is you kind of keep it there so you can see the confiner is you'd go to the ground and just literally kind of fill it in with a background.
Mhm.
Um, right, so that the player is not just seeing the background.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
so that should fix it. Let's see. If not, I'll figure out what's going on. But all right. So
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah. So we should be good. But yeah, that is a good point out. I didn't notice that. So thank you for pointing that out. Well, what other questions you guys got?
That was all I had. Elston just saying like this is really cool, but like, and I'm excited to work with all the stuff you made.
Yeah,
Cool.
it looks really good from my side as well. I'm going to play back this recording as well. Hopefully. Do you want to make sure that the recordings work? I don't know. Do we?
Yeah,
We can keep it running, I suppose. But yeah.
I'm just waiting to see if there's any like questions that maybe Tyrion will also have that you guys also had. So I just want to make sure it's on there because I will send that
Uh,
over to him so I don't have to
yeah, I think it's good. I
redo.
think let's post this in the level design channel, maybe the art channel. I don't know. Just basically somewhere where everyone can see it,
Yeah.
so that like everyone's got a clear idea of what's going on this side of the fence. Because there's a lot of Mac users who are kind of none the wiser at the moment.
Yeah,
Uh,
I might have to upload it to YouTube or something. I don't know if I'll be able to post a straight up video,
yeah.
but I'll try.
Yeah, maybe Google Drive or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be good. But yeah, YouTube probably makes most sense. How long's the video? It's really long. I'm
Right
guessing
now,
it's like an hour.
probably, yeah. It's so
Yeah.
far 45 minutes, so.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I think let's leave it there, and then I suppose people might have other follow-on questions, and then we can just cover those in a separate session, maybe.
Yeah. I'll just
And
cut out
well,
that
that one.
last some of that last parts and maybe first
Yeah,
parts.
that makes
so,
sense
yeah.
because it's more like yeah.
Alright.
Yeah, thank you very much.